Okay, I think they thought I was maybe a little bit taller than I actually was. Can everyone hear me? Great. So, good evening. I think everyone here knows me, but if you don't know me, my name is Naomi McMahon, and my pronouns are they, them. I'm so thrilled to share my ideas about gender and medieval courtly songs with you tonight, but before I get to that, I would like to offer a brief comfort warning. The third section of my program features a typically medieval sexual narrative involving dubious consent. So I will not be shying away from discussing sexual assault in the portion of my lecture which comes before the last set. So we're going to do talk and sing and talk and sing and talk and sing. That also helps. I won't be offended if you need to step away for any reason. But without further ado, I would like to present Should She Be Silent? Fashioning Gender and Society in Trouvère Song. Like the popular song tradition in any place and time, the lyric art of the Trouvères was a form of entertainment. But because the songs are by real people, they carry the cultural ideas of their creators. Since the 1970s, there's been a large body of literary and musicological scholarship concerned with the cultural thread of gender as it relates to medieval secular song. Early on, feminist scholarship focused on looking for evidence of women poets and composers, both named and anonymous, often by trying to discern a feminine version of the medieval poetic aesthetic. Over time, this search for more named women reached the bottom of the barrel, so it seemed. The attempts to codify femininity proved complicated, as they always do, and feminist theory became more gender expansive. In the 1990s, the conversation began to shift towards observing the ways feminine characters are described and represented in medieval songs, with an emphasis on possible interpretations that resist the apparently rigid medieval gender construct. While these modern attempts at resistant readings may or may not directly represent historical truth, it is important to realize that behind our idea of the typical medieval noblewoman lie the lives of many individual women who were real people, with real ideas about their place in the world. Until recently, hardly anyone took their study of medieval song literature beyond the written page, but a growing wave of scholarship has begun imagining these songs in their original context as performances and interpreting these imagined performances through the lens of gender. This overlaps well with the foundations of gender-expansive feminist theory as laid out by Judith Butler in Gender Trouble, where they argue that individuals construct their own gender by performing repeated acts of self-stylization, in essence, a performance. On a related note, Tamara Bentley Caudle, referencing the work of philosopher Adriana Caballero, has recently written about how the gendered qualities of a singing voice have the capacity to create an interpretive filter through which audiences can understand gender dynamics in troubadour songs. Quote, "It matters who sings," she says. "Performance allows the singing subject inscribed in language to free herself from language itself. Voice is thus one way that female desire can be expressed despite or perhaps even through troubadour lyric and its embedded gender system." As a gender nonconforming, historically informed singer, I am drawn to test and expand on these ideas in my own real-life music making. Even when medieval gender constructs are not front and center, they are embedded in the texts. Often, they don't align with a modern progressive understanding of gender. This means that performers have a responsibility to think carefully about how to bring the music and text to life in a way that either reflects their own or someone else's bias about gender roles. In the relative absence of sources that describe actual music making, one of the best approaches for a modern performer of medieval music is to get into a medieval mindset. To that end, my project examines how the Trouvères use song to discuss and test gender roles within the context of courtly love, the literary and musical tradition they inherited from the troubadours. I argue that medieval poets, performers, and audiences thought about and shaped the gendered implications of their tradition as they collaborated through the overlapping authorship, composition, and performance of their songs. Therefore, the historically informed performer should continue this dialogue, interacting with the medieval framework of gender norms by making interpretive choices that orally and visually highlight embedded narratives of gender. Tonight, I will track 3 aspects of this conversation using different genres of trouvère song. First person, chansons d'amour, provide a stage to fashion one's own gender presentation. Debate songs demonstrate the collaborative creation of gendered social norms and behaviors, and narrative songs allow self-fashioned individuals to assert themselves within a fashioned society. I will begin by exploring how trouvères use the Grand Chant d'Amour as a site for self-fashioning. Different authors reflected their individual experiences of selfhood and love in their lyrics by either playing within or working against courtly tropes. I selected most of the songs on this recital for their feminine-speaking characters, who are comparatively rare among surviving trouvère poetry. To understand the significance of this feature more fully and to explore the ways my selections operate with respect to medieval gender norms, it will be useful to hear a piece typical of the larger masculine voice repertoire. As opposed to the anonymous songs that make up most of my program, Compartie Suisse de Provence is solidly attributed to Perrin de Angicourt, a 13th century trouvère active in the metropolitan city of Arras. This song was clearly praised by his contemporaries, as it was awarded the designation chanson couronnée, or crowned song, in Trouvère Manuscript X, making it a good representative example, I think. Thematically, Compartie is a standard courtly love song, featuring a scene-setting first verse describing the circumstances and hopes surrounding Perrin's act of songwriting. Throughout the rest of the verses, he uses several common tropes that serve to fashion a version of himself in relation to others. When he describes the lady he loves, Perrin comments on her beauty, her worth, the power she wields over him, and the fact that she is currently unavailable to him. The author-narrator never addresses the lady directly, preferring to describe her in third person while directing his pleas to God and even to the song itself. Though there is some emotional and personal language, much of the song is dedicated to philosophical topics surrounding love. Perrin contrasts his own noble pining with hypothetical examples of treacherous and false lovers. His goal is to set himself apart from these quote-unquote tricksters by highlighting his long-suffering fidelity rather than attempting to win his lady through flattery. For Perrin and male trouvères in general, this was the most noble type of love. Comparties also represents standard courtly chansons in its poetic and musical structure. One such feature is the song's pneumatic texture. While it's not as florid as some other medieval chansons, this one is not entirely syllabic, and I've circled some neumes here in the modern transcription. It has written-in ornaments in the form of ligatures and plicated notes. The melody is in a standard medieval form known as pedes cum cauda, or feet with a tail, which is essentially A-A-B, but which when expanded looks different from song to song. In this case, I've marked it out here. You can see it looks like this. The tail section, the cauda, has many more poetic lines than the pedis do, though there is much more melodic development in the B section. The phrases do have enough related musical material to make the melody learnable. Poetically, the rhyme scheme is more complex than just one or two sounds, and the syllable counts on the right there vary from line to line. There are many midline pauses and enjambments where ideas continue beyond the bounds of poetic lines, causing each verse to flow differently, which adds to the complexity and oral interest of the piece. In contrast to Perrin's song, the anonymous L'on dit qu'amour takes on musical qualities that seem to have been associated with femininity in the medieval worldview. For example, lamenting is predominantly a feminine activity in many global societies, and several of the most widely transmitted medieval laments feature feminine voice. The text of L'on dit fits neatly within the lament genre, and the music reinforces the poetic mode. This song is reminiscent of another famous feminine lament called Chanterai pour mon courage. Both songs are in an unstable G mode, which divides the octave with a reciting tone on C instead of D, giving the melody an unsatisfying and incomplete feeling. L'on dit, on the right, has a wider range of pitches, less melodic repetition, and a more definitive final cadence than Chanterai, but it still conforms to the medieval tendency to represent feminine speech as repetitive through its use of refrain. Though she fashions herself within a typically masculine role, the noble lover with his unattainable beloved, the first two stanzas of text present the feminine narrator as stereotypically emotional and physical. Towards the end of each verse, though, she breaks the mold and takes on more masculine qualities as the text turns from the personal to the philosophical. And this trend culminates in the third stanza when she compares herself to a masculine character, Pyramus, in a metaphor from classical literature. A few trouvère songs in the grand chant genre feature a masculine beloved and a grammatically feminine or ungendered lyric I, but break the feminine-coded musical mold. On Caname is one such piece. Though one manuscript attributes it to Ricard de Fournival, the editors of Songs of the Women Trouvères include this song in their anthology, as modern scholars disagree whether that attribution is accurate. The melody fits right in with the elegant musical style of the most famous trouvères. In manuscript little a, it appears in an ornamented form, which doesn't actually function intuitively across all verses the same way, but offers a clear idea of the types of melodic variations available to a performer. The cauda is long and its melody well developed, conforming to quote-unquote model grand chant characteristics. The poetry is complex and features courtly love tropes such as metaphorical language about love, an unattainable beloved who is praised for beauty and worth yet never directly addressed, and an outcry against médisants, or slanderers. Yet, the song does not fully escape medieval stereotypes about femininity. Rather than maintaining emotional distance and focusing on metaphysical aspects of love, this song highlights the narrator's inner thoughts and embodied experiences. This combination of musical convention, emotional vulnerability, and unstable attribution makes On Caname a compelling piece, especially as a site for self-fashioning through performance. If this song was composed or performed by a woman, she used music to fashion a gender nonconforming version of herself by appropriating a masculine-coded aesthetic. If it was by a man, the text feminizes him and presents a homosexual narrative. A performer like myself, who is non-binary, likewise has the freedom to use the song's inherent gender fluidity as an opportunity for their own self-fashioning. Even when the language is otherwise conventional, the gender of the narrated voice affects the experience of performing the song, and the gendered quality of the singer and their voice changes what the audience will hear. Now, of the 3 feminine voice chansons d'amour in this program, The last is most stylistically consistent with the masculine voice example. Like Compartie, Mumabali begins with a scene-setting stanza referencing the creation of the song itself. The poetry also references nature and seasons, though it inverts a typical trope by describing winter instead of spring. Another inversion is evident as the author-narrator actively prepares herself for love rather than passively hoping to receive it. This melody and poem are not as complex as Parandanji Course, but the piece conforms to the standard form. It is a shame that this song is incomplete in the only manuscript which contains it, because it is the only grand chant that has both an extant melody and a secure manuscript attribution to a named woman trouvère, Marwe de Dirnio. I would have liked to know how she would have gone on to represent herself in comparison to the normative constructions exemplified by Perrin's song. My friend and colleague Susanna Feldkamp, who will be joining me later in the recital, has delved into the context of Marwe's life, connecting her to the larger artistic community of trouvères and her song to their musical output. Marwe is thus one concrete example of a medieval woman, among others both anonymous and known by name, who participated in self-fashioning through artistic creation. And I hope you enjoy our first set.